Hello everyone and welcome to On Purpose Astrology. This video is looking at the power degrees, some of the power degrees of the zodiac. There's some really powerful transits this year with the outer planets changing sign and what that means when a planet is particularly an outer planet, is at the end of one sign and then going into the beginning of the next sign. And we've got a lot of that going on this year. Let me share my screen and we can take it from there. So, the power degrees of the zodiac and why they are important this year. So, first of all, we have Uranus right at the end of Taurus. And we also have Saturn and Neptune, both right at the end of Pisces. And Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune are all moving into new signs as well. So let's first look at the 29 degrees. Whenever a planet is at 29 degrees of a sign, it means that they're at the very end of that sign and they're getting ready to move into the next sign. The 29th degree of the zodiac is known as the anaretic degree or the critical degree. There's a sense of there's a huge urgency of trying to tie up loose ends to get everything done before it's too late. Time for closure. Time where there's a sense of fatedness, a sense of no going back, but still uncertainty about the future, inevitability of change. The energy feels often difficult and complex. The energy's been built up over the whole period that the particular planet has been in that sign. So, for example, Uranus in Taurus here, you've got lots of complicated Taurian issues that have built up in the time that Uranus has been in Taurus. It's been in Taurus since 2018. So it's had lots of time to sort of explore Taurus. We tend to see, it's called the anaretic, it's called the critical degree, that 29 degrees. We tend to see some negative manifestations of the planet in the sign that it's in. These negative connotations just seem more obvious and they tend to show up in the collective, in world events, in the moods and feelings of the people collectively, and the moods and feelings and events in one's life if you are touched by these transits in your own birth chart. Now, after 29 degrees, the planet involved moves to 0 degrees. There's a very different energy. But I just want to stress here that there is always an overlap. There's always a transition period. It's never like on one day, say Uranus is at 29 Taurus, the next day everything changes. When Uranus goes into 0 of Gemini, there's always a progress, a process, an overlap in the energies where there's that kind of feeling of the old fighting back against the new and the new pushing away the old. And this is part of what brings this kind of sense of there might be some kind of crisis, for example. So let's look at Taurus, 29 of Taurus. So Taurus, as I said, has been Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018. So we've had quite a long time to witness the energies, whether Uranus in Taurus has been transiting your chart directly or what house in your chart it's been in. The houses in your own chart are areas of life. And I'll put the little link in the description here so you can see a brief sort of part of a video that I did ages ago, which just briefly describes what the houses are. We're talking more on the collective level here because we can't get too personal on a video like this. But just as I talk through the sort of psychological themes, the kind of event themes, they do manifest in our private lives as well, of course, but showing up in the collective. Uranus. What does Uranus mean in its basis form? It's the awakener, the liberator. It shapes things up, it breaks things down, it's breakthroughs, it's surprises and shocks, and it brings change. So some of the themes that we have seen while Uranus in Taurus have been to do with money, resources of the earth. Taurus is an earth sign. How are we using the resources of the earth. Security, including financial security, but also emotional and psychological security. Banking. There's been issues around food production, ultra processed foods, fake foods, artificial food. You know, that's very Uranian, isn't it? And Taurus has something to do with food production, the land and agriculture. So how are we eating badly, and how is that having an effect on our health? Also, seismic activity as well. Uranus is about electricity and energy erupting. So seismic activity has been a theme, as well as the climate. Earth, it's an earth sign, Taurus, of course. So Uranus in Taurus, Taurus is a fixed sign. So there's a stubbornness there, a reluctance to change outdated systems that we can see need to change. Those with perhaps the power to change things have been more resistant than many, because it works for you, why change it? Although we see more and more how the distribution of wealth and resources has become wider and wider gaps between the richest and the poorest. And Pluto in Aquarius has something to say about that, and I'll talk about that shortly as well. Broken systems, outdated systems that need to change, things breaking down that need to be fixed, systems that need to be fixed, and have we fixed them? This anaretic degree gives us a sense of urgency. We do need to fix systems that aren't working for us, and we need to do it quickly so we can move forward into a better future. The way we've done things are not really working anymore, the way we've done things in the past. So we need to move forward. We need to tie up the loose ends, as I said, so we can move forward. Uranus in Taurus has also been an invitation to reassess the values by which we live. And there's been collectively a shake-up in the values by which we live. The shock that perhaps old values we relied upon don't work any longer. And our sense of comfort has been shaken up, that uncertainty that comes with a planet at the end of a degree. This is where we are at now. And I put the dates up here. I'm not going to read these dates up. The reason I put the slides up is so that you can see the dates when Uranus is at 29 in 29 of Taurus. But really the whole time period between 18th of June to 26th of April next year, 18th of June this year, 26th April next year, is going to be that period where it's pretty close to that anaretic, that 29 degrees. So these themes, and there's many, many more things. I could do a whole talk on for an hour on Uranus at 29 Taurus, but I want to get through a little bit and maybe plant some seeds and plant some ideas so you can sort of have a takeaway, an easy, quick takeaway, and you're not going to spend hours looking at this video. So we also have, as I already said, Saturn and Neptune, both in Pisces, both towards the end of Pisces. So Saturn in Pisces. We've seen barriers breached, haven't we? Collectively and psychologically, our boundaries and our barriers have been breached. Floods, literal floods. It's been a time period, and we've witnessed almost biblical flooding around the world, and also floods of migrants, and how the world and the world's leaders, Saturn has something to do with authority, has a lot to do with authority and government and legislation. There's a lot of talk about legislation in countries, thinking the UK and US and other countries in Europe and other countries besides, who are trying to clamp down on migration, particularly illegal migration. And there's been, deliberate or otherwise, there's been confusion in the way that has been reported in the news. There's to the point where, because Saturn in Pisces can cause us to be confused about the messages that those in authority are giving us, and that confusion is around often the way these issues are reported, the difference between illegal immigration and migration, and legal migration, and what is right and what is fair. And I think as a collective, there's also been some compassion fatigue actually around this and other issues. There's comes along this Saturn in Pisces with a fear of losing control or not being in control at all. And difficulty in following the rules, Saturnian rules. Pisces as a pure sign doesn't really want to live by rules. It just wants to go with the flow and do its own thing. But rules are constantly shifting. We don't quite know where we are. How are we supposed to act and behave in society? What's the the collective super ego of the way we're supposed to behave has changed and shifted, and that's come out a lot more with Saturn in Pisces. I mean, for example, some of the opinions that people may have said publicly on social media or media generally, for example, things they might have said years ago that would have been, I don't know, acceptable or maybe even funny, and now not acceptable and definitely not funny because of shifting change of the rules and the way that we behave, the societal super ego. And we've seen lots of instances. There's a thing going on with MPs in the UK at the moment of some racist things that they have said on WhatsApp group a few years ago have now lost their jobs in government, for example. So there's that confusion. There's that confusion. And the older people are, because Saturn is something about age, the older people are, the more confusing it is. But the language has changed, the language of what's acceptable and what isn't has changed. So again, there's that confusion and people, scared of getting it wrong in some respects. And then other people like, well, I want to have my free speech and my opinions and I'm going to air them. And that's it, I want to do that. We'll see when Uranus goes into Gemini, when I talk about it a bit later, how free speech is going to become a major topic with Uranus in Gemini. Saturn's also about discipline and where you apply discipline and where you work hard, where you take responsibilities, where you can gain mastery. So Pisces talks to the creative arts in all the different levels and also spirituality. So again, there's been a lot of work behind the scenes. There's been a lot of discipline, and there's some beautiful creative things are going to be emerging, particularly when Saturn goes into Aries, things that have been coming to completion at the end of Saturn in Pisces will hopefully see the light of day. So some positive things as well. Then we have Neptune in Pisces. Saturn, by the way, has been in Pisces since March 2023. So roughly 2.5 years cycle in one sign. And then Neptune has been in Pisces since 2011. So it's a slower planet. So it's been in Pisces for a longer time. We're in the post-truth era. Some may say we've been living through confusing and bewildering signs. We've certainly had the spread of a huge virus that shut the world down. Another sort of Piscean things is things spread, viruses spread, or things spread virally. That idea of going viral has grown and grown and grown while Neptune has been in Pisces. We've also seen the huge spread, because remember, there's some beautiful things about Neptune in Pisces, but remember at that 29 degree, we tend to see some of the things that are not so favorable. Had a huge spread in cons and scams. People's vulnerabilities have been exploited. Romance scams, for example. There's lots of talk at the moment about romance scams and how to spot them, because we've got Valentine's Day coming up on the 14th of February. People are being exploited and, being love bombed, and then think that they're in love and speaking to a real person, then they have money rinsed from them, and then that person goes away and it turns out that it's a scam. So new legislation and new laws need to come in. Again, going really back to Saturn in Pisces, new laws and regulations need to come in, but these coming along, they haven't come along maybe quick enough in everybody's view, in some people's view, and Others will say, we don't want regulation, we want deregulation, we want to have free speech. Again, we go back to that idea of free speech, that is going to be, it's a big issue. Now it's going to be an even bigger issue, I think. Neptune in Pisces is also telling us, well, where is the boundary? Where are the boundaries between ourselves and others? Certainly felt this during the pandemic. We're not our bodies could be infected just by walking through, just by someone sneezing and coughing or walking, getting, an airborne virus. Psychic phenomena has been intensified. Many people, to huge amount of people who have woken up to their psychic gifts, people who didn't even think about or believe in the idea of psychic gifts. It's a new reality. Questioning then, is what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing, hearing, feeling, which seems to come from some other place rather than the tangible world. Is it real? Is it a dream? Is it a fantasy? Now, interestingly, on a world event point, you can look back, you can do your research, or you can find articles online where some amazing research has been done into where Neptune was in Pisces, what happened when Neptune was in Pisces the last time. And one thing that I've discovered through my reading is that the last time Neptune was in Pisces was when the first commercial oil well was drilled. Now we're getting to the end of Neptune in Pisces, and there's been a lot of a push in climate change activists and climate change conferences and get-togethers where there needs to be, it's thought, to cut down to go to net zero, to stop or to reduce or to phase out fossil fuels, have more have more like wind farms and solar and stuff like that, of course. But when we get right to the end of this Neptune in Pisces, the idea of fossil fuels, new fossil fuel oil drills, etc., oil wells, etc., being drilled has come back right at the end of this Neptune in Pisces transit. The idea that was mooted by Donald Trump in his campaign to become president, and also in his inauguration speech when he did become president, was drill, baby, drill, wanting to have independence of energy and fuel for the United States of America, to rule the world in terms of the oil and gas that they have. That's really interesting. There's no judgment here. I hope there's no judgment really here in anything I'm saying. We all have our different views, but it's interesting to witness this and to sort of look at the astrology. Scandals as well, the spread of scandals. Neptune and Pisces has something to do with spirituality and also with religion itself. There's been a huge scandal in the Church of England at the moment that's still ongoing, historical abuse of children and young people by people within the Church of England, and the allegations that those in charge at the top of the Church of England organisation have tried to cover up these allegations of abuse. So there's a few things for the 29 degrees of Taurus and Pisces. You can see there's a lot of things that we need to clear up. We need to clear up the scandal, make sure that scandal I just discussed and the changes are made, safeguarding changes made so things aren't repeated and it doesn't carry on. But what about the new energies? 0 degrees. So the first power degree is 0 of Aquarius. Pluto has been in Aquarius since 19th of November 2024, and it's going to stay in Aquarius until 2044. So it's got a long period. It's got 20 years to go, nearly 20 years to go. It's important for a couple of reasons. But first of all, let me just talk about what this 0 degrees really means. It's the first degree of the sign, the new sign. So it's the birth of the new energy. So with Pluto in Aquarius, when it went into Aquarius, and it's still very early, very, very early in Aquarius, and will be very, very early in Aquarius for a long time, it's the birth of new energy. It's a sense of renewal. It's a sense of a new era. It's the seeding of new paradigms. And it's where a new vision is needed. The idea of going from complexity is about the 29 degrees. A planet's been in that one sign for the whole 30 degrees that it's been in that sign, and it's built up lots of complexity. When we get to the zero, it can feel the need for a refresh, for something that feels more simple, more authentic, including simple solutions for complex problems might be sought. I mean, that could be for the good or the bad. Sometimes simple is best, sometimes simple doesn't see the whole picture. It's also great for creativity and creation and manifestation work as well. For those of you that are involved in that or general energy work, look at that. We're going to be looking at zero Aquarius. We're also going to be looking at zero of Aries. That's even more powerful, but I'll talk about that very shortly. So Pluto in Aquarius, well, rebellion and revolution. It's associated with rebellion and revolution historically through other transits as well. So we're going to see rebellions. We're going to see some kind of revolution. We've already been going through a technological revolution. Pluto's now in an air sign. Environmental and humanitarian issues. Now, what's interesting again, when I mentioned something that happened when Neptune was last in Pisces, looking back at when the last time Pluto was in Capricorn, which it was in before it was in Aquarius, there was that widening of the wealth gap. The rich became rich, the poor became poorer when in the 18th century Pluto was in Capricorn. And we saw that same pattern with Pluto in Capricorn that's just passed. It's early days for Pluto in Aquarius, but the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, as I say, in the 18th century, the economic system was starting a long process of change. And what we saw, I mean, a long process of change, not just one not just one ingress, not one Pluto in one sign, but much longer than that, much longer period. But what did happen when Pluto was in Aquarius in the 18th century was that widening, that wide gap between the rich and the poor started to shrink, started to get smaller. So we can live in hope that the wealth gap will narrow while Pluto's in Aquarius. So this is the promise of zero Aquarius, something more fair, more equal, more freedom as well. Freedom is another key theme. So we also have we should also mention the 2020 conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Why are we going back over 4 years? It was in December 2020. This conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn was at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And then, of course, Pluto came and activated that. Now, Jupiter and Saturn are now, since July last year and into July this year, are having their square, Jupiter square Saturn. Why is that important? Well, that's important because we are seeing, while we're having all these changes, I mean, what's really momentous at the moment is that we're having all of these really important outer planets moving signs, and that hasn't happened for many years. So we're living in almost unique times to have all these changes coming all at once, all within a year period. So we've got Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, all changing signs. And I count Pluto going into Aquarius, even though it was at the end of 2024, not 2025 or 2026. It's really important. So why is Jupiter and Uranus, Jupiter and Saturn cycle important? It's important anyway. It's very important anyway, particularly in world astrology as well. But in our personal astrology, if you have Jupiter and Saturn in any aspect in your chart, it's that idea of purposefulness, of needing to be purposeful. So let's have a look first of all about what Jupiter and Saturn means. And this is the best description I've seen that actually works in the real world. Often we'll look at Jupiter and Saturn and go, oh, well, Jupiter expands and Saturn contracts and blah, 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 which is all true. But this is how it really works in the world. So it represents this cycle. It's from, by the way, Mundane Astrology, a book called Mundane Astrology by Bajan, Campion and Harvey. And if you're interested in world astrology, i.e. mundane astrology, I think it's a must-have book. It's very technical and it's really rich and dense in information. But this is how it describes the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. It represents the ground base of human development, which marks the interaction between the perception of ideas, potentialities, and possibilities. This is the Jupiterian stuff, and their manifestation in the concrete material world, which is Saturn's work, isn't it? It's the part of the process of working out the idea of structured, purposeful, and responsible social growth. So at the square that we're going through at the moment, the square between Jupiter and Saturn, it's not at 0 degrees of Aquarius, of course, because they've both moved on, but it's potentially very, very important, not potentially, it is very, very important because it goes back to, it's been activated, this whole 20-year Jupiter cycle we're going through at the moment, it's having its first square, is also linked very importantly to Pluto in Aquarius, of course. So what I think the world needs, and what the astrology is prompting us to do in this first square of this Jupiter-Saturn cycle, is to think about structured, purposeful, and responsible social growth, of giving substance to possibilities and potentialities, rather than, as I said, rather than conflict between expansion and contraction, optimism and pessimism. So we're really invited at this square, as I said, July last year to July this year, between Jupiter and Saturn, and the ideas that I've talked about with Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto Aquarius also wants equality, it wants freedom, right? It wants to see an end to, it doesn't like the idea, not does it want to see an end to, the planets don't make us do anything, but, or ask us to do anything, they simply really symbolize the energies that we are working through here on planet Earth as humans and as a collective. But really, it is telling us that we need to find a sense of purpose, collectively find a sense of purpose that is responsible and that makes the most of the possibilities and potentialities that are out there, but in a really fair, Pluto, and equitable, equal way that is not so much the top-down process of everyone at the top has all the power, but more bottom-up. And it's where we come into that idea of Pluto and Aquarius and revolution of the people rising up. We may or may not see that with Pluto in Aquarius, but there's certainly, again, that potentially to go out to ask for, to try and create responsible social growth. And certainly when we look back to zero, it's about creation. It's creating something new. It's creating something more fair for everyone. Now, the other thing that we need to mention, that I need to mention, is that when we look at, we had Pluto in Capricorn. Capricorn is an earth sign. And then we had Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces. They're still there. They're going to be moving on. These are the dates when they are at the 29 degrees. I'm going to look at when they're in 0 of Aries shortly. but that's water. They've been in the water signs. So we've had an earth and water time of the for the outer planets. Now we're going into fire and air. Things are very different energies. That's very Fire and air is very different energy to earth and water. And the Jupiter and Saturn cycle has a lot to say about that. So here we go. I've already mentioned that Jupiter and Saturn, I'm sure many of you watching already know this. Jupiter and Saturn are a 20-year cycle. So every 20 years is a conjunction, and then that starts a new cycle for Jupiter and Saturn. But there's a larger cycle called the Great Mutation Cycle, which means you get a number of conjunctions in the same element. So if you look at, and I've shown it pictorially because you can see it there and it's much easier to explain. So you can see in 1802 to the year 2000, look on the left-hand side, that kind of brown chart there, you can see that the Earth was going through the Earth mutation. We were going through the Earth mutation here. What does that mean? Well, you can see here as well, you've got a bit of fire at the beginning, a bit of air at the end. That is because they go through what happens with these mutation cycles. They're over 200 years old, as you can see, is that it will, at the beginning and the end, it'll dip into the next element and then dip back. So really 1802 to 2000, we've had the Earth mutation. What have we seen? We saw, well, the Industrial Revolution, material mastery, the exploitation of fossil fuels, the focus on productivity, it's earthy stuff. Now we've moved into, say, in 2020, we became solidly into the air mutation. You can see in 1980, we had Libra, we had the conjunction in Libra. I say each line here is a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. We had a conjunction in Libra, and so we had the first taste of the air element, and then it went back into Taurus, and then now it's settled. You can see the next water conjunction would be 2159, which will be long after I think we've gone on to another world, to another place. But you can see here, if you look at this chart from 1980 to 2020, you've got a 40-year transition period, and which has been a period of massive, massive change as it's been taking us from the Earth mutation into the air mutation. In 1980, we didn't really have mobile phones. I don't think we had mobile phones, or they were just starting. We didn't have the internet. Now we've got AI, you know? We've got so much technology. It's gone from the Industrial Revolution in the Earth mutation to the technological revolution. That period really since sort of after the Second World War until now has been called the Great Acceleration. You can see the speed of change has just accelerated. This Earth moves quite slowly. Air is fast. Air is fast. The digital revolution, as I said, the technological revolution. We've gone from the manufacturing age to the information age, as I said, social media, internet, mobile phones. It's also this period that we've gone into now is being known in some quarters by the Anthropocene. You know, we have the geological eras, the Jurassic, etc. This has been called the Anthropocene to reflect that this is the first geological era that is potentially mostly or largely affected by human action. So you can see the air stuff here, Pluto in Aquarius, and then the air mutation of Jupiter and Saturn here. Really important. And then we have, as I said, we've got Saturn and Neptune going into Aries, and we've got Uranus going into Gemini. I'm going to talk some ideas, you know, this year, and then dipping out and going back into settling in them next year. But so we've gone from outer planets in Earth and water signs to outer planets in fire and air signs, the air signs I've just talked about, Pluto in Aquarius. So there's a different energy coming in. Not only are these planets changing signs, the energy, the elemental energy at its most basis, the elements of one of the most basic foundations of astrology, always worth looking into the elements. So that earth water, when you get the earth water combination that we're just going out of now, was about realism, productivity, practicality, money and finance, building things, impressionability, charity and welfare, spirituality, issues around privacy, secrets, leaks and floods. I've already talked about floods. The maintenance of resources, the focus on hard work and productivity, focus on personal and national security. And when we get then the other ideas for this earth and water is the perhaps the erosion of our ideals and our faith in things, whether that's faith in our spirituality, faith in ourselves, faith in the world, faith in our leaders, as we're going through to the end of this earth water cycle. These are when we get into the 29 degrees of earth and water, this erosion of these ideals and ideas and values. And the need to move forward with strength and determination. And then we go into air and fire, as I say, moving forward with strength and determination. So after earth and water that we've been in for a long time, we go into the air and fire combination. It's more idealistic. We might have had our ideals challenged. Now there's a fresh idealism. It's aspiring. It feels more positive, more inspiring. There's new awarenesses coming in. We'll find out later, however, how realistic these new ideas, these new visions, this new idealism works out. We might be setting ourselves up for disillusionment further down the line, or we might be creating something fantastically new. It also gives us a bigger perspective. Fire and air moves a lot faster. So it's the sense of kind of potentially of needing to keep up, potential overwhelm, but also being able to see the bigger perspective as well. There's something quagmiry about the earth and water, whereas this feels a lot freer, a lot more faster moving. Wildfire, ideas spreading like wildfire. We've seen literal wildfires, of course, and we've been moving more into this fire and air. We may see more of the same, unfortunately. The other thing to be aware of is there might be a lack of grounding, not wanting to put in the grunt work that the earth signs, got the earth mutations gone, and there's a lot of hard work going on when, the Industrial Revolution, the work was done, a lot of work was done in factories by the poorest people, obviously, but a lot was produced. Now there's a little bit more of people not wanting to do all that work, and not saying not laziness. There's lots of inspiration and there's lots of enthusiasm wanting to get going, but less of that patience to really lay the foundations. So really we're invited to lay the foundations for the new that we want to come, rather than lack of patience of going, it's all got to happen now. And we've seen that a lot more in the world. It's all got to happen now. It's going to happen instantly. We're seeing it in politics at the moment. Things are just happening so fast. Things are moving so quickly. Constantly looking for new ideas, fresh ideas. But the danger of that is projects will be started but not be followed through properly. So burnout is certainly going to become a lot more of a lot more public awareness and healthcare awareness of burnout and mental health. We're already going through a mental health crisis, but under earth and water, perhaps it was more. I talked about privacy, didn't I? More If you were struggling with your mental health, you kept it private, you didn't talk about it. You might have gone and got some help on the side, but it wasn't talked openly. Now it's going to be more open, less shame. There's less shame, I think, with this fire energy, more perspective. So these are some good things that we can really help help ourselves and help others. There's a naivety as well about, particularly about zero of Aries. Now, I talked about the zero degree of any sign brings out the newness and the purity and the more naive and um, the more easy, perhaps in some ways, aspects of the sign that it's in. The 0 degrees of Aries is particularly potent. The reason being, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's the birth of something totally new. It's associated with the private becoming public. I've already talked about people privately coping or not coping with their mental health. Publicly, people are now talking about their mental health more. Anything that secrets, there may not be any secrets anymore. I mean, social media, if you think about the things that social media companies, the data that they have on us, they know a lot about us. They can target us for marketing to sell to us and all manner of things. So it's really powerful, really powerful. More revelations about things that have happened in church and state as well. I've already said about the idea of looking for simple solutions to complex issues. Very creative. It's creative energy, particularly zero of Aries is incredibly creative, incredible creative potential. It's about finding your voice. Got Uranus in Gemini, of course, at the same time, and a new confidence, shedding old skin, particularly pertinent because it's the year of the snake in Chinese astrology as well. Living to full potential. So Saturn in Aries, it's in Aries until April the 28th. So with Saturn in Aries, you see the mismatch of caution and doubt and impulsivity and confidence. So you see those two things playing out and trying to find the commonality, and that's not always easy. We see trailblazers, pioneers wanting to take control. This is one of the things we'll see. It's a time for pioneering change, for good or bad, in government and with world leaders. As I say, not trying to make any judgment or bias here. Competition and independence, strong themes, but this could be a lack of cooperation, a lack of even friendliness. Aries is the opposite sign of Aries is Libra, which is about cooperation and trying to find diplomatic solutions. That might be a little bit harder under Saturn in Aries. But it's really time to, there's a lot of positives about the 0 degree of a sign. Time to follow our passions personally and in the worldview, following our passions with discipline and taking responsibility for our actions as well. Mars is impatient generally, which is the ruler of Aries. It wants to act, but we need to remember there's always actions have consequences, of course. Now, Neptune in Aries is going to be in Aries till 2023. When you look back, there's a lot of interesting historical things that have happened with Neptune in Aries. One of them was the American Civil War. The last time that Neptune was in Aries, and also at the same time we had Jupiter in Gemini, not Jupiter in Gemini, Uranus. Jupiter is in Gemini, as a matter of fact, but Uranus was in Gemini at the same time. So we're having some synchronicities here between what was going on the last time Neptune was in Aries. And I'm not saying civil war, I'm not saying that at all. History, the energies do repeat themselves, but in different ways, in different times. History doesn't repeat itself accurately. I'm not saying there's any civil war. But there might be warring words. Uranus in Gemini, war of words. Certainly confusion around gender issues, more gender fluidity, but also division around around gender issues and particularly trans issues as well. We're seeing some of that playing out in the world at the moment. We're going to see potentially more more discussion around the idea of so-called toxic masculinity and what toxic masculinity is again, it's a matter of opinion. It's moving and shifting depending on your own point of view. Something that might feel or might seem perfectly reasonable might feel toxic to other people. So again, this is where Neptune can cause us to be confused, can cause us to, I guess, fall out, to say. Rumors spreading like wildfire as well. Aries energy is fast. Neptune is about rumors and scandals. There's a saying that I love about the the lie has travelled halfway around the world before the truth has got its socks on. You know, rumors spreading like wildfire. Pioneering spirit, the idea of winner takes all. Interestingly, as well, historically, when you go back through all the different times throughout the ages that Neptune was in Aries, you can see lots of important events in the birthing and the spread and big events in Christianity. So there's a religious feel here to Neptune in Pisces. The spread of the spread of Christianity under the Romans, but also major events such as the Crusades, the Christian Crusades, and the Church of England split from Rome under Henry VIII happened under Neptune in Aries. So we should see, or we could see, some changes in religious establishments, particularly Christianity during this time. Certainly charismatic church leaders, charismatic spiritual leaders as well can come in, but are they all that they seem to be? Are they the real deal? Time will tell, of course. Also, interesting that there's pioneering work was done in medicine with Neptune. Neptune in particular, Neptune in Aries was pasteurization by Louis Pasteur, killing bacteria. Bacteria spreads, right? The virus. Bacteria isn't a virus, but viruses do tend to spread under Neptune transits. Also historically, Neptune in Aries saw innovations in photography. Now, of course, we have AI images. I can go onto an app or a website and within seconds produce a beautiful picture with no artistic talent whatsoever. You know, the seeding of the moving pictures happened as well during a Neptune in Aries. And now, of course, we have these deep fakes. We can't trust the pictures that we see. Can't trust that they are real because of AI. Can't trust that the person we are watching on screen is actually the real person, or whether it's a deep fake. Especially if they're trying to sell, you know, if there's the images, moving images of celebrities telling us to buy a product, and celebrities having to go on record and say that is not me, as well as deepfake pornography as well. Mars, Aries has something to do with sexual desire and using sexual desire to con people, basically. But let's hope that we will see the beauty of Neptune in Aries as well. Neptune in Aries, we shall see the dissolving of something that's outdated that needs to change, and the birthing, zero Aries, the birthing of a brand new vision for the world. Activism, revolution, revolution in our thinking, in our spirituality, especially with Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius at the same time. Religious and spiritual awakenings, conflicts dissolving. Let's hope. Let's keep our fingers crossed on that idea. Now, another thing that can feel quite confusing with Neptune in Aries is there's a loss of individuality with Neptune. It's the collective consciousness, it's the dream world, it's the merging of people, things, places, consciousness, ideas, whereas Aries is very individualistic. So we could see that go either way, really. We could see more individualism or more of us being a collective. The idea of selfishness versus selflessness, and where is the balance to be found? It's not healthy for anyone or the world to be completely selfish, and it's not also healthy for selflessness either. We could see new cults coming along, charismatic leaders coming along, but also new ways to be creative and innovative. And next year in 20th of February, Saturn and Neptune come together. So all these ideas come together in a Saturn and Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries 45. A lot more on that in future videos. But to finish on Uranus in Gemini, free speech. We hear a lot about free speech, social media, and in the media in general. The truth will find a way is a good phrase, I think, for Uranus in Gemini. The truth will find a way. Uranus is the awakener. It awakens us to the truth. All this confusing Piscean stuff that we had here, the 29 degrees, we're confused. We want to know the truth, whatever the truth is, if there is truth. The way we communicate with each other, the way we communicate, it's interesting. We're already seeing more communication online on social media and less sort of face to face as we go into fire and air. You can also see perhaps a growth in different kinds of communication, revolutionary types of communication technology that we haven't even envisioned yet, even telepathic communication. It's the disruptor and how that might disrupt. Yeah. I believe there's probably pockets of people out there who are already doing that, already speaking to each other telepathically without words like this. We might find out a little bit more about that. Also, changes to the way, revolutions and changes to the way we get our information. It's interesting that that newspapers began and evolved under Uranus in Gemini. Historically, older transits of Uranus in Gemini, and now we're seeing newspapers on actual paper, less and less, not making any money, not making too many sales. Printing revolution. We've had the printing, we had a printing revolution during a Uranus in Gemini in an more general air mutation as well. Oh, sorry, Earth mutation. Now under the air mutation and Uranus in air, a revolution in how we have our information, maybe straight into our brain. Who knows? Who knows? Air travel and aviation, it's another theme for Uranus, particularly Uranus in Gemini, how we make shorter journeys. The world will feel a lot smaller than even it already does. Contact with ETs. I think extraterrestrials and UFOs, unidentified flying objects. There's already been more willingness for authorities to speak about unidentified flying objects, not necessarily the idea of aliens. But we may actually find that governments and those in authority and in the military know a lot more than they are telling us, and these secrets will be revealed, I'm sure. The idea of UFOs has been taken more seriously. I was watching a video recently where someone was speaking about that drone wars have been going on. There's a drone war going on in the world where countries that aren't agreeable to each other's regimes, or countries that are competing, are sending drones to spy, basically spy drones. I think there'll also be an awakening to what consciousness is and how consciousness works. That's going to change. That's one of the mysteries of modern science, that so many scientists are thinking, have now started to believe that consciousness isn't just in our brain, it's something bigger than that. And we'll find out more, I'm sure, during this Uranus in Gemini transit. And also about how the collective consciousness works. I mean, when I saw a murmuration of gulls the other day in the sky when I went for a walk just in my local park. How do they, what's that group mind thing? Where does it come from? How do they fly in perfect formation without bumping into each other and crashing? It's incredible. So here are a few ideas. Now, the other power degrees for 2025 are the eclipse degrees. And I didn't want to talk about those here because I didn't want this video to be too long, but part 2 will be about the eclipse degrees. The eclipse season starts in March. I'll tell you when the eclipses are, some meanings for the eclipses, and then some ideas for when other planets hit those degrees, hit those eclipse degrees, because that's where the trigger points are. But for now, have a look at planets and points in your chart that might be at around 29 degrees, so 28 degrees to sort of really 1 or 2 degrees of any of the signs here that we've mentioned here. So 29 degrees, 28 degrees of Taurus, of Pisces, 28, 29 Pisces, and then anything in early Gemini, in early Aries, and also the opposite sign, so anything in early Sagittarius or early Libra, or very, very, very late in Virgo, for example. Have a look at that in your chart as well. And then you'll be having transit, so you might see these at play and at work in your own charts. But for now, I'm sending lots of love to everyone, and take care, and please subscribe so that you don't miss the second one. The eclipse video is going to be really interesting. Eclipses, if you don't follow them, are really worth following in world events, particularly, but also in your personal lives. So I'm going to stop share here, say goodbye, and end this video and say lots of love as always. Thank you. Bye bye.